You're listening to the Ranch Stewards Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the stewardship and conservation of grasslands, diverse ecological landscapes, and the salt-of-the-earth individuals who dedicate their lives to this endeavor.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Ranch Stewards Podcast. I'm Lauren Pederuto, your host, and today I've got a great conversation for you. I'm sitting down with Dallas Mount, owner of Ranch Management Consultants and the Ranching for Profit School, along with Wes Salveson and Aaron DeVries, co-owners of D&K Livestock in Malta, Montana. We get into a lot in this one. We start with how each of these guys found their way into ranching, including Dallas's own path into owning Ranch Management Consultants. Then we dig into each of their experiences with Ranching for Profit School, the mindset shifts it's forced them to work through, and how it's changed the way they run their businesses and day-to-day operations. From there, we talk grazing practices, succession planning, what it really takes to bring the next generation into a ranch, and we leave it with a good conversation on land stewardship. Before we jump in, I just wanted to make a quick reminder that the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance is hosting a Ranching for Profit workshop with Dallas Mount in Glasgow on September 15th and 16th of 2026. If you're listening to this before then, make sure to grab your seat at ranchstewards.org. So if you're looking to sharpen your business, your mindset, or you just want some real perspective from guys who've been in the trenches, this episode's for you. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get into it.
You want healthy pastures, healthy cattle, and healthy bottom lines. But high fencing and labor costs, lack of time, and rugged, isolated pastures stand in your way. That's where Vence comes in. Our simple plan: collar your cattle. Set endless virtual fences anytime, anywhere, and watch your herd rotate pastures effortlessly. Visit VenceFence.com today to get started. Vence, grazing reimagined.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining the Ranch Stewards Podcast this morning and for tuning in. Today, we have an awesome group of guests here on the podcast. We've got Dallas Mount, Wes Salveson, and Aaron DeVries. So I just wanted to say thank you, all three of you, for being here today, and we appreciate you. So we wanted to start off with you guys giving us a little bit of an introduction about yourself and who you are, where you grew up, and tell us a little bit about what your operation looks like today. So Dallas, why don't you start?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Dallas Mount. I'm the owner of Ranch Management Consultants. That's the company that puts on the Ranching for Profit School. I live in Wheatland, Wyoming. I grew up several different places. My dad was a Methodist pastor, so we moved around a bit. Most of my growing up years were in Colorado Springs. I finished high school in Utah, which is where I got into ag, and then went to school at Colorado State and University of Wyoming. And my family and I have lived in Wyoming for about 25 years.
Awesome. Wes, do you want to go next?
You bet. So grew up in Malta here and married Aaron's sister in 2009. We lived in Havre till 2015 and moved back to be part of the ranching operation, and been doing that since. Since then, had 4 kids running around, so stay busy between all that.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm Aaron DeVries. I too grew up here in Malta, Montana. I graduated high school in 2007. Attended Montana State University, Bozeman. I got a degree in animal science in 2011, and then came back here onto the family ranch there in 2011. Got the opportunity to ranch with both my grandfathers, my dad, and then since then, Wes and Carmen have came back, and also my other brother, Evan. So we're primarily a cow-calf operation, but we've added in stockers in the last few years. And I'm married, my wife, Angel, and we got 3 kids. We're also raising on the ranch.
Awesome. And then you are both owners in D&K Livestock, correct?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Well, great. Well, thank you guys for the introduction. So, Dallas, I thought we would kind of start with you a little bit and have you just tell us a little bit more about yourself, and for everybody to kind of get to know you a little bit more in your story. So, one of the first questions that I thought of was, did you always know that you wanted to be a rancher growing up?
No, I wouldn't say I had any thought of it till late high school time. And yeah, I started working when we were living in Utah. I had a lot of buddies that were into ag and into high school rodeo and stuff. So I was, hanging out with them and working with their families and And I always liked working with my hands. I always liked solving problems. So I kind of fell into ranch work and really enjoyed that. And then, that was the time when you're being told you need to go to college and picking college degrees. And so animal science sounded like fun, right? It might keep me connected with livestock. So I had no idea. I wasn't from a family ranching business, and I didn't think there was any way I could do that as a career. But I knew I wanted to be working around the space somewhere. So that's why I went and got a couple of animal science degrees. And then my wife and I settled in Wheatland, Wyoming, and we bought a little piece of ground and then picked up a few leases around us, and that's kind of when I started thinking, I could actually do something with this, and so the ranching now is a fun side hustle for me. We lease a few pieces of ground and run some custom cows in the summertime. I hire somebody in the summer that helps me run that, and that's really a blessing. I always try to find a young person that wants to be involved in ag and bring them in and give them a shot, kind of like people did for me. When I was not connected with it, somebody took a risk on a non-ag kid and turned them loose with some livestock and machines. So I always like to pay that back. Given other young people who didn't grow up in it, the opportunity to get their hands involved in it. So, but no, I didn't really think about ranching probably till really I was out of college when I really had something going on. But I always, through all my schooling years, I was always pretty intentional with going and working places and finding places that offered different experiences than what I'd had before. So I had the chance to do quite a bit of cow-calf while I was we lived on a ranch, my wife and I, when we first got married there north of Fort Collins, and did that. And then I went and worked on some yearling places, high mountain places in the summertime. We worked on some big hay operations. I spent about a year in a feedlot, started out driving a manure truck and ended as a pen rider. And I loved that. That was a great experience. Got to put your eyes on thousands of cattle every day and look at sickness and just see stuff you couldn't see on a lifetime of ranches. So that was really good. But I also knew I didn't want to be in a feedlot for the rest of my life, right? So I looked for opportunities to get out. But yeah, now. I spent about 17 years working for the University of Wyoming Extension. I was a livestock with a regional assignment, worked with ranchers all over Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska. That was a lot of fun. And that's when I really started in the line of work that I'm in now. So, I came to it with an animal science background, a lot on nutrition, reproduction, all that kind of stuff. Pretty quickly learned I needed to become better rounded. So I started running around with the range guys who worked for University of Wyoming. Mike Smith was a big influence on me, and some of the other kind of old school range guys that I had the opportunity to run around with. And they really kind of tuned me up on the ecology pieces and those pieces. And then a colleague and I started the Ranch Practicum School, which was an 8-day business management school for ranchers. And that we used Harlan Hughes at the time to work with us on the economic side. And that really tuned me up to the number side. So I didn't have any kind of economics background, any of that kind of training. But once we started using Harlan and doing the stuff that we were doing there, I really dove into that head first and was fortunate enough to be around some people who taught me, some good stuff around economics, finances, and pairing that with ranch management. And that's when I met Dave Pratt and the Ranching for Profit School. I went the first time as a student, and I was blown away by what I saw there, and absolutely was enamored with it. And then after a few years of pressure in Dave Pratt, he finally invited me to be a teacher with him, and so I started learning how to teach ranching for profit. I taught while Dave Pratt owned the company. He was my predecessor from ownership of Ranch Management Consultants. So I taught alongside with him for several years, and then one day he said, "Hey, would you like to own this thing someday?" And I didn't even think about it. I said, "Yes, absolutely." And so we started working on a deal for me to buy him out, and that happened. Now I think we're going on year number 7 of owning the company and moving it to Wheatland.
That's great. So when you first really started thinking about, ranching more than just raising cattle, but more into the business side, were you and your wife already kind of leasing some ground, or were you?
We were, yeah. I think that helped make it more real for me, right? When I had my own money on the line and there were some years there when we were first getting started when I was buying my neighbor's calves, and then we would background those calves over the wintertime and sell them that middle of that following summer. And that was really scary for me. At the time, now looking back, it was kind of small numbers, but at that time, I mean, that was all the money I had, right? Was going into those. And so I'm like, the last thing I want to do is come back at the end of the year and tell my wife, well, I blew that money, So
Right.
it yeah, I think that helped with what we were doing, because when you're in the game, it's different from just talk or thinking about being in the game, right? So
Sure. Yeah, I didn't grow up in a ranching background either. I really only got into it about like 7 or 8 years ago. I'm not like a big operator right now by any means, but when you put your money in it, that's when things change. And I've worked on a few different ranching operations myself, but it's definitely once you, even if it's a couple $1,000s, it's like, okay, well, I got money in this now. So your whole mindset changes for sure. So the other question I wanted to ask you too was, when you started attending Ranching for Profit, what made you decide to want to become a teacher with them? What were the things that you were seeing that you were like, I really want to start teaching this rather than just attending?
yeah, I think that what I saw is I saw a group of people attending that school who were invested in being there, who were asking big, high level questions, making significant changes in their business, and I wanted to be a part of that. Right? When I was with Extension, I loved being a part of Extension, but sometimes it feels like you're just playing with little small things, right? And the questions people are asking you, like, what do I spray this weed with, kind of stuff, right? Rather than, hey, how do I bring my kids into the business, right? Or should I do this or should I do that? So it was significant stuff we were talking about dealing with, and I felt like Ranching for Profit was a part of helping make a real positive change on the lives of the people that were there. And I wanted to be a part of that. So, and I always enjoyed the teaching part. I felt like it was an area I was pretty effective in. And so I knew I wanted to be a part of it. Little did I know the steep road ahead of me I had to become effective at it. And Dave Pratt was very good to me and very patient with me of helping me become effective.
Yeah. Yeah. What were some of the like most surprising things about your time with RFP? So say when you first started taking it over, were there big surprises that came about, just like whether it was teaching the classes or running the business as a business? Like, was there something that you didn't expect at all?
Well, I don't know. Looking back on it now, I thought when I started teaching Ranching for Profit, I'd been teaching with the university for several years, and I thought, I kind of got this handled, right? I know what I'm doing walking into this classroom, and I had some really bad days in the classroom early on, and I'm sure Dave Pratt was sitting out there in the audience wanting to pull his hair out, and just thinking, oh my God, what did I do with this guy? I think what it was in what flustered me some coming in there is when people have a lot on the line to be there, the stakes of delivery get higher, right? And I remember telling myself, every one of these people has $1,000 a day to be here in this class, right? And when you figure out the tuition, lodging, travel, right, all those kind of things, and then I'm looking out there counting all those heads and like, okay, it's my job to deliver that value to them. I think that was a lot of pressure, and as a teacher, I probably put that on myself, and it probably helped me be less effective than if I'd have just said, just be humble and go out there and do your thing, So yeah, it was a steeper climb to learn the curriculum and deliver the curriculum probably than I was initially prepared for. But yeah, the other pieces, now that we've moved into the business ownership role and leading the business, it's all these things that we teach at Ranching for Profit. I struggle to implement them sometimes in my own life, right? And to be a good leader for my business. I'd much rather it's much easier for me to just go out and teach another class, just like it is for a rancher, just go outside and fix some more fence, right? Check some more calves, right? So for me, teaching class is my Whitby work, working in the business. And sometimes it's easy for me as a leader of the business to get so caught up in my working in the business that I neglect working on my business. So I'm having to take these lessons that we teach in class and become better at applying them to myself. And yeah, there's some things we're doing now in terms of my leadership of the company that are trying to get me be better at focusing on that WUBB. So I'm if I stand up there and preach this stuff, and sometimes it's hard for me to implement it in my own life too. So I have the same struggles.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, when I went to Ranching for Profit back in 2023, or 24, and I went down in Texas, and actually one of the guys that was sitting at my table had gone to Ranching for Profit the previous year and had implemented many of the principles in his electrical business. He just I think was part owner in it at the time and then completely bought his partner out or something, but then he came back to Ranching for Profit because he had a few cows and he had bought more, and he just like kept raving about how much the principles can apply to other businesses too, so that was really cool to get his perspective on things as well. What has been the most rewarding experience for you running this business in the last several years?
Without a doubt, it's being involved in the Executive Link program that we run. Executive Link is after the Ranching for Profit school. People who want to continue on with us, we place them on advisory boards with other ranches. Those advisory boards meet 3 times a year. And the reason that's so rewarding for me particularly, is we get to pull up alongside and be engaged with those people as they continue to lead their businesses. And we get to be a part of that and see those changes. So yeah, going to the EL meetings, sitting with people who we've known for, 10, 12, 15 years now, seeing where they are now, seeing where they started. You get to know them, you get to know their kids, you get to know their family stories, and enjoying and celebrating the successes with them, and then also being up alongside of them when times are tough, because we all have tough times, and so you get to pull up alongside of them when times are tough, and then you get to celebrate with them when they have the wins and the breakthroughs, and that's for sure the most rewarding.
Yeah. I have a couple of friends that are in Executive Link, and they love it and said it's really, really helped them a lot. So, well, great. Well, thank you for sharing all that, Dallas. Appreciate it. So now I'd love to pull in Wes and Aaron and have you guys just tell us a little bit more about your operation, and then when you were first introduced to Ranching for Profit, and then you can kind of give us a little bit more of your experience there. So whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, before we did any Ranching for Profit stuff, we were pretty much solely cow-calf. We did a little, sold some commercial bulls too. And our first interaction with it was in 22. We did a workshop that was held here in Malta. And when you first go through it, you got your own mindsets and you got to wrestle through them, which is the hardest part of it, is getting yourself out of your own. And so after that, we looked at stuff and made some changes that were very beneficial. And then in January of 25, me and my wife went to a full 7-day Ranching for Profit in Billings. And so then, we got there, and I think that workshop ahead of time was real beneficial. We'd already did the mind wrestling before that. We kind of knew what to expect a little bit more. So you weren't fighting yourself sitting in the class. You could learn how to implement it.
Yeah.
And then I'll let Aaron tell his view on it.
Yeah, I'll kind of just echo a lot of that. I mean, we were, cow-calf. We raised all our own hay. We grazed for 7 to 8 months out of the year, and then fed that hay the rest of the time. We'd heard about Ranching for Profit before, but probably were never really super serious about it. Thought, oh man, that costs a lot of money, or how can you get away for a full week at a time? So, we knew local ranchers who had been there before, and they sang its praises really good, but really weren't quite ready for it yet. But then, did the 2-day school up here in Malta with Dallas in the fall of 22. And that really started to, I think, challenge our paradigms about, does this work? Will it work up here? Because, we came in with all, I think, everyone's excuses of, we're in a commodity production here. Like, can you really do anything to affect your profit outside of just taking what the market gives you? And hey, enjoy the good years, ride it out through the bad years, and we'll all be hopefully okay at the end. But then started to learn, no, there are definite things we can do in our business to affect that profit. Also, just looking at yeah, looking at different ways to change that profit. And also, like, hey, we always like to say we're long ways up north. We can be pretty cold and snowy. Like, can some of these grazing practices really work up here? Like, no, we're just different. But then finally started to change a lot of those paradigms. We took a lot of tools away from that school, I think, and ran with them, I think, as far as we could go without going to the full school. And then, yeah, like Wes said, he went in 25, and then my wife and I went this last January down to Wheatland of 26 and really got that full kind of complement of tools that we could take away from it. But yeah, that's kind of our experience.
What were some of the first principles that you implemented in your operation when you got back from ranching for profit, and what did that look like for you guys?
I think the first one we took away is actually having meetings. I mean, yeah, we're a family ranch and we're pretty good at working cows and putting up hay, but like to actually sit down and talk about things. I mean, we started, and I mean, they're not every week, but we pretty well do weekly meetings to schedule things out, and we've become much more efficient with our time there. But then also having meetings, talking just what Dallas said earlier, working on the business, talking about the business as a whole, were things, I mean, we'd never done before, but now sit down and talk about it. And I mean, maybe talk about everyone's goals. What are we looking for out of this? And then like, okay, how can we go ahead and accomplish those goals? So those were some big takeaways right away. I got a couple more if you got something.
Yep. So yeah, we kind of looked at stuff, and you start looking at what's actually getting the job done, what's paying the bills here, and you start leaning into that more and doing less other things. We haven't totally completely cut everything out, but we've made them more efficient. And so that's freed up time. So we're not just all summer haying the entire summer, just feed all winter. We still hay and feed some, but we've looked at it and said, all right, we make money doing it here and here, but to do all this extra wasn't really doing anything. We just a lot of extra work for break even. So why do that? We might as well do something that's going to push us forward.
Yeah, the economic evaluation tools were huge for us. And like, it was kind of interesting after the first 2-day class. I mean, the amount of time we sat around arguing about what should be in overheads, 100% of, is the tractor fuel really going in? And then, I mean, got to a point like, oh, well, we're going to give 30% of the tractor fuel to the haying operation and the rest goes to overheads. And like, so we had some of the tools, but then now after we've both gone to the full class, having that full like toolbox, I mean, some of those being able to sit down and truly evaluate our operation and how is it doing actually, because with just the way we're structured, with some personal ownership, corporation ownership, it was hard, but having a tools and a template to do that really helped us out, being able to evaluate different enterprises and then plan ahead for, are we going to make a profit at the end of the year, and being able to do those things.
So, Aaron, you had mentioned the mindset piece in the paradigm, and obviously that's a huge part of ranching for profit. Would you be willing to share a little bit more, maybe, like one or two things that you came away with that really you had to kind of wrap your mind around, and this is the way that we've been doing it, but we need to change it? And I'm sure with that, there comes a lot of fear with that, making big changes in your operation that has been going on for years. Was there anything that kind of came up for you guys there?
So just trying to impact our overheads. I mean, like we spent a lot of time haying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we looked at that and have really shifted, trying it. For us, it worked, we thought, better to try to graze as close to 12 months out of the year as we could. We had a good snow year, I think, in the winter of 22 and going into the spring of 22. We had a lot of grass around, and we hayed solid for a month. And I mean, baling all night, swathing all day. And like Wes and I came to the realization, like, we want to be more on the cow side. This isn't what we're here for. I mean, I haven't seen kids it felt like days on end. I mean, get home and just go to sleep. And so some of those things with, hey, can we make this work in a different way, and looking at trying to graze 12 months. And in doing that, I mean, just reducing other bills with maintenance, upkeep on our equipment, the fuel bill every month, and then our time. I think we do better now moving, shuffling, taking care of cows as a result of that. Because I mean, you'd kind of just kick them out and ignore them. But not having, maybe putting up as much hay has been a stretch for some of us on the operation of not having that security blanket all the time. But it's worked out really well, I think.
Yeah.
And then I'll say the other paradigm of just being in a commodity market and just, hey, you got to take what the market gives you, and that's all we can do. But saying, yeah, well, maybe we have that market, but can we control our inputs into it and do better and kind of maximize what we do have, I think has been a big shift.
Yeah. Wes, do you have anything to add in terms of some big mindset shifts for you?
Aaron got most of the big ones there. When you first hear about opportunity costs and try to put those on the cows, boy, you got to wrestle with that one.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'd love to ask you guys a little bit more about your grazing practices in the winter. So for our listeners that might not know much about ranching or grazing practices, especially in the winter months in Malta, it can get pretty cold. So would you guys just be willing to share a little bit about what that really looks like for you guys and what you've changed over the last couple of years and what you're maybe planning on for this winter?
Yeah, so I think always in the past, I mean, we grazed every acre we had between, I mean, I'll say like May 1st, maybe we could go to November 30th. And then after that, we just pulled the cows in down by the buildings and fed hay till the grass greened back up again. Mm-hmm. But what we've done is we ended up with a drought, so we had reduced numbers. So that kind of pushed us towards this a little bit, but also then we stockpiled forage. We used some of our native grasslands that maintain pretty decent quality even when they go dormant. And we stockpiled 1,500 acres to graze during those winter months. And it depending on the year, it might not quite get us all the way through. We still got to supplement some hay, supplement some protein or something. But that's how we've tackled it.
Yeah. Dallas, in your experiences for ranchers that are in winter climates, what have you heard from ranchers in terms of how they're grazing in the winter? Have you seen some common themes?
Yeah. So the stories I'm hearing from Aaron and Wes are pretty typical. One of the things that Ranching for Profit is we have for people that haven't been through the school, like if you're talking to your neighbor and they're just like, oh, you ever heard of this thing? We get a lot of people that say like, oh, you go to that school and they're going to tell you to quit making hay and do all this stuff. So we have like a reputation of prescribing certain practices. And what you find when you come to the school, and maybe these guys can back me up, is we don't tell people to do any of those things, right? We're not like, oh, you guys should all go home and sell all your equipment and stop making hay. We don't tell people to do that. All we do is we say, let's dig into the numbers of your business and then let's figure out where you want this thing to go, right? So I really appreciated that Aaron said, they were haying all the time and they sat down and said, this isn't what we want. Right. And that's the most important thing. It's like to figure out, okay, as the owner of this business, what do you want? What's your goals here? And now let's dig into the numbers and let those numbers tell us what's actually going on in this business, what's working, what's not working. If Aaron had said, hey, we don't want a hay, but then we looked at their business and the hay was carrying the thing, that would have been a much harder decision to say, well, we're going to stop making hay, but this is the thing that's actually economically working. But to the point of your question, Lauren, was if you look at like averages and collections of ranches, and we're blessed that we get a look inside at the economics of a lot of different ranches every year, right? So we get to see a pretty good cross section, especially when we get into those northern climates. Feed cost and the cost of having all the stuff to make the feed and do the feeding. That's what cripples a lot of these ranches, right? So if we can find a way to address those things, to lean up those overheads, to make this thing work without needing all the stuff, we can find a lot of economic leverage in these businesses to make them more profitable. And as you look forward, right, is the stuff getting cheaper? Is the fuel getting cheaper? Is the labor to run it getting cheaper? No, all this stuff just keeps going up and up and up. So, right now when we got the calf prices we have, we can get away with some of those things. But when this thing pops, and it's going to pop, when it pops, you better be ready to have a business that works at the next market, or maybe not just this market. So that's a common thing we see, is looking for ways to graze out longer in the wintertime and just design a business that's simple, that doesn't require a whole bunch of overheads.
Yeah.
I will diddle that. I didn't ever feel pushed towards prescribed practices, but we had the tools to evaluate that. And I mean, that was we still hay, and like we ran the numbers, and like our alfalfa ground is still worth haying. Like that produces more per acre than we can grazing it. But a lot of our irrigated grass ground, we do better on the numbers grazing it instead of haying it and feeding it later. So those tools to evaluate that, and I'll be honest, coming out of college, didn't know how to do that. So we were able to after that.
Yeah, that's great. And kind of sticking with the theme of grazing practices. And Aaron, before we started recording, I had asked you this question, but I thought you had a really great answer, just more leaning into the stewardship of the land and, why ranchers care about stewardship rather than just checking off a box. And I'd love for you to expand a little bit more on your answer there. I thought it was a really good one, if you remember what you said.
So I think in agriculture in general, but I'll say ranching specifically, we're pretty good at checking off boxes and doing whatever we kind of need to if someone's willing to help us out, whether it's calf programs with our handling practices, or NRCS, FSA, if you can get some help with some infrastructure, and we got to do rotational grazing, change out some fence. We're all pretty good to check off the boxes, do what we have to get those. But I think if we're really taking care of that land and practicing good practice, or good grazing practices, good stewardship practices, that land will often take care of us through times, whether it's drought or whatnot, that it wouldn't if we just abuse it. And I'll say that this whole idea of stockpiling grazing for us has been beneficial. We're able to rest pastures at critical time. We're able to stay off of some pastures and then graze them during times when, dormant grazing is a great tool for it. You're not going to really hurt that land. And so just some of those. And then for us, we're in a really good grass year, and that ability, the mindset shift to stockpile that and like, hey, we can use it this winter. We can use it next year. We don't have to just take it all every year. It has been a big mindset shift in I think in taking care of the land and having it help us out.
Yeah. Would you say stockpiling is sort of the biggest idea of stewardship that's changed for you guys over the years?
So that's a big one, but also in some of our and we've gone to cell grazing and really trying to be on and off ground in a short amount of time. Without going too deep, overgrazing is that second bite before that grass is recovered, and within 4 or 5 days we're probably not going to see that. But when we and I'll be honest, it's really easy to kick cows into a pasture for a month and walk away and leave them and just come back. But we've, I think, done better job when we're moving cows through pastures quickly in smaller areas so that we're not having that negative impact on those grasses.
Would you mind, for listeners that don't know what cell grazing is, would you mind just giving a quick little definition of that?
So a lot of our pastures can be 500 to 600 acres, but what we'll do is with temporary electric fencing, we'll shrink that down to 15 to 25 acres per day. And so every day those cows get a new area of grass to go graze. And depending on how you can structure it, might only be on that chunk of ground for one day, or they might walk through that area for a number of days, going further away from our water source is what's kind of limiting for us. So, but yeah, they're only in a small chunk of a bigger paddock for a shorter period of time.
Yeah. Awesome. Wes, do you have anything that you wanted to add there in terms of what Aaron was talking about?
Yeah, so we've done it on some of our irrigated grass, and you can about 3 years we've been doing that
Yep.
now. So 3 years, and we can see the difference there. I haven't quite seen it so much on the dry land, but I don't see why it wouldn't eventually keep coming, because I mean, everything, the processes happen so much faster with that artificial water on that irrigated stuff. So it's just a time thing that eventually the processes will catch up, and it'll make our dry land much more efficient too.
Well, thank you guys for sharing all that. I appreciate it. So as we're talking about ranching for profit and different principles, one thing that we've noticed within RSA, succession planning has been a really big topic that seems to be coming up for people a lot. So I just want to ask you guys a little bit more. And what advice would you guys give somebody who's just getting started? And Dallas, I know you had mentioned it earlier. So if you want to share some advice first, and then Aaron and Wes can follow that.
Sure. So advice for somebody who's just getting started. So like a young person who wants to make ranching their business and they're just getting going. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take maybe the person who grew up in it, and then maybe let's take the person who didn't grow up in it, and take those two approaches. So if you grew up in it, my advice to you would be leave home. Don't go off and get a university degree and then come right back home. And there's really good people who have gone that path, and this is no casting any shade on those folks. Good for them. But if I could design a program to help develop the next great ranch business leader, I would say leave where you grew up, be really intentional about where you go and about who you go work for. So, look at a region that's different from the region you grew up in, probably a segment of the industry that's different from what you grew up in. And then go and like call people up who live there, you might know, and say, hey, if you could only work for one person to learn the most, who would you work for? And just kind of design your own program of putting yourself alongside of people who are making a difference, people who are doing things differently, people who are driven individuals. And, it probably really takes 6 months to a year of being at a place before you've really seen what's going on there. So I think, going and working a place for a month isn't long enough, right? You gotta go there and be a part of what's going on, and then go to a different place, right? And so just make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who are constantly pushing you forward, who are helping you learn. So that'd be my main piece of advice for someone who grew up in it. For the person who is coming fresh to it, I think sometimes, especially the young people I visit with today, they expect things to happen too quickly, right? So, you got a 22-year-old who just bounced out of something, and they think, 5 years from now, I'm going to own 500 cows and own half the country in the county, right? And that's not reasonable. So just put yourself in a position. I think the same advice kind of applies as go work for somebody who can teach you some things, right? And be with that person for a while, and then go on to another place. I think it's great to work for somebody for a time period rather than just get out and say, I'm going to start my own thing. You can learn from their mistakes, and then, be good at your own personal finances to where you're building up your balance sheet, create some opportunities before you just jump in whole hog, but then recognize at some point you're going to have to make a bold decision of leaving the security of the paycheck and putting your own neck on the line, so to speak. So, and probably a good age to do that is somewhere in the late 20s, early 30s, is what we generally see where it's kind of time to start jumping out of the paycheck mentality into the business owner mentality. So that'd be some advice for the people getting started.
Yeah. And Aaron and Wes, I'd love for you to chime in and give us some of your advice on what you would say to somebody who did grow up in it, like your experiences, and then somebody that you think would take some valuable advice who's just getting into it, really wants to ranch, and, with all of the, there's a lot of challenges at the moment to start fresh, but I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, so if you grew up in it and you're on the ranch, education's important. If you grew up on the ranch and you get out of high school and just stay on it, that's all you know. You don't know any other ideas without education. You only have one narrow view of stuff. Because I think of when we first did the workshop, once we was done with that, it felt like you've been looking through binoculars for so long. We were, really focused on weaning weight and genetics. And once you kind of pull down the binoculars and just not focusing on a couple of things, you can start seeing the broader view of things. And so I would push that. And someone starting out, you need to go get experience. If you do that, I mean, you got to be a little scrappy to even be considering starting your own. So you got to use that to your favor. You don't have a big overhead burden starting out. So I'd also push the education on that too. If you do it right the first time, you're going to have a good footing all the way through to get started there.
Yeah, I'll say it. And so I was super blessed to come back, work with two grandpas that allowed me to kind of fill into a management role. They let me make mistakes, make my own mistakes and learn from them. And I'm sure they were shaking their heads at time when I had them out doing some synchronization protocol as it's pouring rain in June. But they let me, they were very gracious with that. And so as we talk about coming back to ranches, just there's always work. There's always enough work on these places for people to come back, but to have a discussion about clear expectations about do the numbers work? What are we bringing back? Are we bringing back something extra, or are we just coming back to be an extra ranch hand? Is just super critical. Being open and honest about expectations, and is there room? And so as we evaluate for handing it down to a next generation, looking at those numbers and like where are opportunities for growth, where are opportunities for people to come in, but they got to start sooner. And also like even for us, where like we have a fair bit of owned ground, leasing ground is a great opportunity for getting in and expanding ground. It might not be permanent, but you don't have that upfront cost. And that's one thing, like, as we've looked at being able to bump numbers and decrease numbers, like leased ground is a great opportunity for that. If you just look around, talk to people, ask people.
Yeah. So Dallas, I actually had a question for you in terms of, you've worked with a lot of ranchers, thousands at this point, I'm guessing. What do you think the number of ranchers that you've worked with at this point in the last several years is?
I'd have to go back and run some math to put it into. So our company's been around for 40 years, but I've only been kind of on the scene with the company for maybe the last 12 to 15, somewhere in there. We put about 450 people through Ranching for Profit every year. But a lot of those are coming from the same business, right? Like Aaron and his wife came together, right? So the number of ranches would be fewer than that. I mean, it's definitely in the thousands of ranches. But yeah, it's so I feel very blessed that people have been, allowed us to speak into their businesses at that level.
Yeah. Is there a common thread that you feel like you've seen with the most profitable ranches?
Yeah. Those two aren't necessarily connected, right? Happiest and probably just broader than just happiness, right? But contentment and those kind of things, right? So
Sure, yeah.
you can have a crazy profitable business that no one wants to be a part of, and your family hates you, right? So let's not shoot for that. How about just the most successful businesses with a successful broader definition more than just profit? I think some of the people who I admire the most, some of the business leaders who I look up to the most, some commonalities among them. I think humility would be really high on the list of just, hey, I've got a lot to learn. I don't know everything. I think another commonality would be vulnerability, the willingness to say, here's the situation and help me figure this out. Right. In rural America, there's a lot of unhelpful pridefulness that we tend to have, where we kind of think I'm struggling with this stuff and I'm going to struggle alone and in a stoic silence, right? Rather than having the vulnerability to say, hey, I don't know how the hell to do this. Somebody help me figure it out. Right. And be that mindset. So I think those two things are really common. And then I think the word I'd use would be grit. You know, when we identify these things, and like when we have the courage to say, this is what we want to build, and my spouse and I are aligned on this, then the fortitude to see it through and recognize that this is probably not going to be a 1, 2, or 3 year path. This is going to take some time, and it's going to take some sacrifices on other fronts. So I think those things would probably be high on the list. You know, Aaron mentioned this, Wes mentioned this, willingness for self-development, right? So the people who I look up to the most are those people who every year are saying, what's the next thing that I'm going to invest in to help myself become better? You know, and maybe ranching for profit's part of that. Maybe the next thing is a part of that. Maybe another thing is a part of that, right? But they're readers, they're listeners, they're people who are going to stuff in person, who are taking intentional time away from the business to work on themselves and then also connect with their family, right? So, you know, they're taking vacations, they're getting off the ranch, and it's not just all about ranch work 24/7 all the time. So I think those would be some commonalities among the people who tend to have the most successful businesses.
Yeah. Contentment, I think, is the word that I was looking for there. That's a good way to put it. All right, I have a couple of questions for you guys, a little round table, like to complete the sentence. I'll just ask a few, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to see all of your answers here. I wish more ranchers would, and then you guys can just kind of jump in.
Their numbers and know what they mean.
Okay.
Just echo the education thing again, because, man, yeah, it's between podcasts, there's many good courses you can go to, Ranching for Profit, and other ones that are just so helpful that if you don't know what you don't know until, but yeah, there's a lot of information available anymore.
Yeah. To that, what's a book every rancher should read?
Who is, I'm not even going to think of the name right now.
Well, if you do, I'll add it in the show notes, and when you think of it later.
Okay.
I can't think of it right off the top of my head. It's the one by Bonsma.
Man, cattle Veld.
Man, cattle Veld. That was a good one for like how we evaluate range and then livestock that work for us.
I think I would say Knowledge Rich Ranching by Allan.
On through right now is no, man, I just had it too.
You're good. What's it about?
It's Pasture Profits with stocker cattle, and I'm forgetting the author at the moment, but
Is it Greg Judy?
no,
It might be an Allan Nation then.
I think it's
that one
Allan.
is. I think it is. It's the same
Yeah.
guy who wrote the one I was just talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's got some sell-by marketing in it that's pretty valuable.
Okay, great. I'll put all of those resources in the show notes for people as well. Okay, last question. If you could change one thing about agriculture, what would it be? Or ranching, whichever word you want to use there.
I think for me, a huge benefit was the mindset of production is going to equal profitability. Just like Wes kind of mentioned that earlier, chasing 1 more pound or 10 more pounds of weaning weight, and then the pride that goes along with that. But is it really beneficial or profitable for us to keep doing those things?
Yeah, that's a great answer. Dallas, do you have one?
Well, there's things popping into my mind. I think one of the things that bothers me the most about agriculture, and so I'll answer it this way. If I could change one thing about agriculture, I would eliminate the victim mentality that is so pervasive among people in agriculture. This idea that we are a victim of the weather and the markets. It is so unhelpful. So let's just wave a magic wand, and those thoughts are no longer allowed to enter the head of an agricultural operator.
Well, thank you guys for answering those questions. So I thought that I would wrap up here a little bit. And Dallas, we're hosting you in September up in Glasgow, and we're super excited to have you there. Our Ranchers Stewardship Alliance workshop is going to be the 15th and the 16th. So what can people expect from this 2-day workshop?
Yeah, we're gonna give everybody a taste of what you get at Ranching for Profit. So we're going to dive in with what I hope are some good discussions. Rather than being just me talking, I'd love to have some great discussions with the people that come. We're going to look at an example ranching scenario and figure out what's going on under the hood of that business. So we're going to introduce you to some of our economic tools that we use at Ranching for Profit, teach folks the language that we use around gross margin analysis, overheads, gross product, which gives you the ability to look inside a business and figure out what's working, what's not working, what can I do about it. And then we're also going to do some financial analysis. So we separate economics from finance. Economics is about where is value creation occurring. Finance is about how does the cash flow in my business happen? And they're both very important. So we'll spend some time on that example ranch doing that. And then as the group identifies some strategies to fix that ranch, now we're going to talk about leading change in an agricultural business. So when we've identified those strategies, it's not simple enough to say, all right, I've figured it out. Everybody come with me, because it doesn't work that way in real life, does it? So we're going to talk about, how do we lead through these complicated businesses? Maybe I'm not the one in charge, or maybe there's a ownership structure that's very traditional, right? How do I implement change in this business and bring people along with me so I don't sacrifice these family relationships that are very important to us as we're doing those things? So we'll spend a couple days doing that, and then we'll see what the group wants to do. I love to let the group drive the discussions that we have. At the 2-day workshops, we generally spend a couple hours on succession as well. And I've given you kind of some ideas here, but we'll go a lot deeper, talk about what are some of the things that make successful family businesses last through the generational transfer in a more healthy way. So we're going to dive into some of those things as well.
Great. Thank you. And RSA is going to be posting a lot more information on that. Registration is open right now, so people can head to our website to register for that as well. So Aaron and Wes, final question to kind of follow Dallas there. If there was a rancher that was a little bit hesitant to go to this workshop, say you're talking to yourself before you went, what would you say to them to get them to register for the workshop, and what the most helpful piece of it you think will be?
I'd say tell them go in with an open mind. We're really good about going in with preconceived notions, go in with an open mind, and be willing to look at new tools and how we operate and run businesses.
Awesome. Wes, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, if someone was hesitant about going, I would just ask them if they think their business is perfect and that they can improve it.
Nice.
Because if anyone answers yes, I'll call them a liar.
Yeah. That's great. Well, that's a good note to end on then. That's some good advice. Well, unless you guys had anything else that you wanted to add or any final closing thoughts, I just wanted to say thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and our listeners today. And yeah, it was a great conversation.
Thanks for the comments, guys. Appreciate you guys weighing in on it. And Lauren, thank you for hosting. Well done.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dallas, for being here.